is still quite warm at the moment, although very soon the temperature is really going to drop. So I have been very busy in the garden the last couple of weeks, and behind me I have got my fruit bed, and I've been very busy in here, just giving it a tidy and sorting everything out. I've got my rhubarb here, and I harvested the last of it a couple of weeks ago. I'm not going to harvest any more of it for this year, so I will let any leaves grow. When they have gone brown, then I will take them away, just clear any debris from underneath, and I will put them in the garden waste. If you can put them in your compost heap, then do, but unfortunately I can't have a compost heap in this garden because the rats decide that they want to make a home in it, and that's not very good. I don't really want them running around the garden. So I have also pruned back my gooseberries and my currant bushes as well. You don't need to prune them back a huge amount, just sort of tidy them up a bit. That's all you're really doing. Now when you prune the stems of your fruit bushes, you make sure that you do them at a 45-degree angle. Don't do them horizontally like that. So you want to cut the branch at a 45-degree angle, because when it rains, the rain will hit the top bit and will run off. If you cut them at a horizontal angle, then the rain will fall straight onto it, and it could, if there's a split in the stem, it could sink in and down into the stem, and it will could eventually rot the plant, and we don't want to do that. So make sure that whenever you prune anything, whether it be a rose, whether it be a bush, you've got a shrubbery, always do it at a 45-degree angle. And I've also done it just above a bud as well. So these guys the bushes will lose their leaves over the winter, don't worry about that. But in the spring, then all the leaves will come back again, and then they'll start growing. I have got, hopefully you can see here, is one of my grapes. I've got one on the other side. They haven't produced any grapes this year, but then they are sort of getting settled into their new home. This one over here behind me is quite old. It was in a big pot, and I then moved it out of its pot and into here. So it has only been in for about a year, I think. And the one on this side, again, has only been in for about a year, but they've grown really well. What you will find at this time of year is your leaves on your grapes will start to lose their green, and they'll go sort of red and yellow, and then they'll eventually fall off. It's quite normal, and don't worry about it. Over winter, your grapes will basically just look like a stick. They're not dead, they're quite happy, they've just gone to sleep. Now, I've also, in this bed here, I've got my strawberries, and I have pruned those right back to the ground, about an inch from the ground. So let me show you those in a little bit more detail. Here are some of my strawberries. As you can see, I have cut down any of the leaves that were brown, I've got rid of. And any of the bigger leaves I've just cut down. Just get hold of them with one hand and then just cut with a pair of scissors or a pair of secateurs, about a couple of inches from the soil. Now, if you do end up cutting some of the new leaves that are coming up, don't worry about that. New ones will grow, the plant won't mind at all. Now is the time to sort out any runners you've got. So if you do have strawberries that have produced a load of runners and you want to move them, then just start placing them in spots where you want them. If you have got some strawberries growing in places where you don't want them to grow, then just get a trowel and dig them up, and then you can move them to where they should be. But these leaves will start to grow, but they won't grow very much now, and they'll sort of go a little bit dormant over the winter, and then when the spring comes again, then they'll get the leaves will start growing and they'll come back into life. But if you clear away all the debris, then it allows the oxygen and the air to get through, and we all like a little bit of a tidy up, and strawberry plants do too. Here I have got my raspberries. I've got 3 lots of raspberries here. I've got 2 autumn varieties and I've got 1 summer varieties. Now what I have done is I've actually cut all of the stems down, now all apart from a few. Now if you've got autumn growing raspberries, then at the end of the season, so about now, what you need to do is you need to cut down every single stem and cut them, don't cut them right down to the ground, cut them about 3 or 4 inches above the ground. They do travel a little bit, so you might get some popping up here and there, and if you do, you can dig those up and move them back into the line that they're supposed to be, or if you don't have any space, then you can always get rid of them. Summer fruiting raspberries are slightly different. You need to remove the stems that have fruited that year and leave the ones that haven't fruited. Now it's very easy to tell those apart because the ones that have fruited, the stems at the bottom are brown. If they haven't fruited that year, you leave them and those stems are green. So get rid of the brown ones, leave the green ones. In this bed I've got my potatoes. I have had lots of potatoes from buckets and I've got 2 buckets left to harvest. Once I have sorted all of those out, then I am going to start digging up the potatoes in this bed here. You can see that they've gone all brown and that's absolutely fine. I will leave those there and then at least I know where my potatoes are. I have got a few rogue ones growing all over the place, so I will have to harvest those and try and find those as I go. Try and get all of them out of the ground, because if you leave any in, then they will start shooting next year. So once all the green has gone and the stems and the leaves have turned brown, your potatoes aren't going to grow anymore. If you have got clay soil, you will need to get them up as soon as you can, because if the clay soil gets really wet, then it could rot your potatoes. So once I've done these 2 buckets, then I will look at getting all of these up and then they'll all be finished and I will store them in a hessian sack in the garage and they will be absolutely fine. Now this on the top, this is spent compost. This compost came from the tomatoes that were growing in the greenhouse and some chilies and some peppers and cucumbers and all those bits and pieces. And I wasn't going to throw that compost away because it's still perfectly good. So I just knocked all the soil around the root off and I just put that on the bed. Now you can either put the whole lot in your compost bin or you can stick the whole lot on your garden. It's entirely up to you, but don't throw away that compost, that spent compost. It can go straight on the garden. In this bed here, I've got some Mange 2, late sowing Mange 2 that I sowed, which is not as good as the early one, but it's still doing okay. Now if your Mange 2 go too far, don't throw them away. You can always use just the peas inside. These are the parsnips, which are doing really well. They won't be ready to harvest until they've had at least 1 frost. But if you run your finger just under the soil, you can actually feel the tops of them. Oh, that's a big one. Ooh, that's about that round, that one. Very exciting. And so they are still growing, so just keep watering those, but don't water them too much because you want to encourage them to grow down. I've got a couple of lines of carrots here which we are digging up and harvesting as and when we want them. I need some more for dinner tonight, but they've done really well. And then I'm not sure whether you can see, I've still got some spring onions just here. And we're harvesting those. If they get too big for spring onions, then what you can do is you can just roast the onion itself, which is really nice because then they turn really sweet. They're lovely. And I've got some beetroot there. I harvested a couple of those at the weekend, and one of those weighed 1 pound 10.6 ounces. It was fabulous. I did take a photo and I popped it on Facebook so you can have a look. And then we've got some more carrots there, and then the beans, the French beans, are still going. The leaves are fading, but they are still going, which is great. So I'm going to keep those going until they're not going to produce any more. The beans aren't as long as they were to start with at the beginning of the season, but they're still beans, so I'm not taking those down quite yet. And here are the brassicas. The kale is doing brilliantly. I've got some Brussels sprouts at the end, and they're about so big, some of them, so they won't be ready. They need a little bit of a frost, a little bit of a cold chill before I start harvesting those, but they look really good this year, so I'm really pleased with those. I got rid of all the sweet corn behind me. I've still got a few tomatoes that are ripening, so I'm harvesting those as and when I need them. And the courgettes have finished, but the pumpkins are still here, and they're not huge this year. They're about so big, but to be honest with you, the kids are much older and I don't really want a massive one. I just want a pumpkin that I can sort of get in the oven without breaking the shelf or anything like that, and just sort of scooping it out and putting stuff in. So they are, for me, they are just the right size. The butternut squash didn't do brilliantly this year. I've got a few and they're really only tiny, but I think that was because they got sort of covered in all sorts of other bits and pieces. They didn't have a huge amount of space to sort of spread. So next year I will be going full guns on butternut squash rather than pumpkins. That's what I say now, but I'm likely to change my mind maybe next year. But that is the garden as it is going. It's all sort of, there's lots of tidying to do. I've got loads of buckets down here of garden waste that need to go in the garden bin when it's been emptied, and then whatever doesn't go in there, then I will take down the tip and I will put it in the garden waste there, and then they can, it's basically the same thing as your garden waste bin. They all get put together, so it's not like it's going in the general rubbish at all. So yes, lots of tidying up to do now in the garden, and make the most of this weather because it is going to drop, plummet like a stone, and we are supposed to, fingers crossed, get a little bit of rain. We haven't had rain down here in the southeast for months and months and months. We've had the odd spit spot, but nothing that has done any good whatsoever, really. So it has been a wonderful summer, really lovely, very long, very hot, and enjoyable, but now it needs to cool down and we really do need some rain. Well, that's how everything is going in my garden in the middle of September, and I hope you've had a really good year as well. Take care of yourselves, look after yourselves, and stay safe, and I will see you in October.